Hey, gang, welcome back to the PetaPixel Podcast. And things are a little bit different this week because often you get a little bit of a perk if you watch the video version of it. But this week I would recommend against that because
Don't
we've
say
got
that.
Jaron sensuously lounging in an absolute garbage webcam video feed going on right now. So you know what, everyone, audio's the way to go this week.
I have to look here, right?
Why
Okay, at the...
Why are you both in the same room, and what's going on, gentlemen?
Chris?
Well, okay, so first off, let's explain why Jaron has a blanket over his nether regions. And
I'm wearing pants.
oh, finally, okay. Well, we're in the room together because we want to make this podcast happen. But Jaron and I are in Prague, in the Czech Republic.
Fun.
Yes.
What a wonderful, beautiful place.
It's very amazing, and you would hate it here. You wouldn't be enjoying it at all.
I'm skeptical.
There's no history. There's no plaques. There's no
Well, the plaques that there are,
museums.
they're in Czech.
Like,
So.
This is a very young
Google
country with
Translate.
zero history. I don't think we're convincing him. No, it's amazing.
I'm gonna try and keep my resentment to a minimum for the good of the show today. That's kind of my
I
plan.
appreciate that.
And
That's
the
very
other
big
part of
you.
my plan is helping our listeners and viewers, our unfortunate viewers, our lucky listeners, to learn a little bit more about you all. So, guys, I'm curious. You're there for a Fujifilm launch going on right now,
Yes.
the brand new GFX100RF, which you'll be talking about at length later in this episode. But what was the first digital Fujifilm camera that made you say, hey, maybe these guys are actually on to something that you were
not my
actually
first ever.
quite
Got it.
impressed with? Not your first, but the first one that was there's a little bit of Fuji spice going on right now.
Oh, you go first. I don't know.
Oh, it's the X100RF. Oh, for sure.
that was
Really?
the
It
first
took
one.
that
It took
long?
you 6 versions.
So for what it's worth, I was for most of my career as a journalist in this industry, I was never the person assigned Fujifilm. So it would always be someone else. Like when I was at Imaging Resource, it was Jeremy.
Mhm.
So I never did that sort of thing. So I never got familiar with their products at all. So I still, their menus are very foreign to me because I haven't used a ton of Fujifilm cameras. But the X100RF was the first one that I spent a lot of time with and fell in love with. And yeah, I'm these guys are cooking over here. And yeah, Chris is wrong in his opinion that the X100RF is not a good camera. It is a great camera.
I never said the X100RF is not a good camera. I said much more in a politically correct fashion that all X100 series cameras are absolute dog crap.
That's right. Well, I took that to mean he didn't like my favorite camera. What
wonderful camera.
What was the camera that did it for you?
So for me, we're gonna go back a ways. How's this? Is the mic good there? We're gonna go back a ways.
Chris, be serious.
Sorry. It would have been Fujifilm's first DSLR that had their color science, the good color science. So
the
the
S3?
Super CCD. I think the S2, S1, S2. I mean, I don't know. I can't remember anything. But you guys all know at home what I'm talking about. Super CCD, Fujifilm. It was in a Nikon body, right? Repurposed. But that was the first time where I was oh, image quality is actually pretty good out of this. Because it seemed like a crazy idea to go up against Canon and Nikon and Pentax at the time. But it actually took off, and a lot of professionals really appreciated the color science, even back then.
See, I'm going to jump on a different camera, but the same technology. I remember when the F10 came out and everything was 8 and 10 megapixels, and this wimpy little compact camera with nothing special about it whatsoever had 6 megapixels, and it just took stunning pictures and really held on to highlight information. I'm what kind of dark wizardry is underneath it? And it was a smaller version of that Super CCD sensor. So I think image quality has always been the thing that kind of sets them apart to a degree, although I would say definitely with the X100RF, Jaron, it's more the shooting experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But see, the one I chose is way bigger, and it had an APS-C size sensor, and it had interchangeable lenses, Jordan. So that way I win.
Also, I will say that as much as I like the shooting experience of the X100RF, I like the pictures too. I think the image quality is quite good. I love that sensor. So
Yeah, X-Trans is kind of like a spiritual successor of that. If you're curious about those S-series bodies, one of my favorite, I don't know, I don't want to speak for Chris, one of my favorite videos we ever did is a retrospective on the S5 where we actually captured my son's first steps into Chris's arms, not my own. Which is, been a sore spot, close to a decade later at this point.
Yeah, that was a memorable episode. Memorable episode for me too.
We got Fuji talk. We got some news. I want to get through this so I don't have to look at that terrible webcam footage anymore. So let's start the show.
Okay, so how's this?
He can't be serious when we're
like a boom
So
mic?
this is the one downside to like being in the same room with Chris is he won't take it seriously if he's in the room with anyone else. He starts getting silly, and
he has an audience. If we're through a webcam, it's a series of boxes, and he has to be professional. But now he's among friend.
This is reality. No, this is playing off of each other. This is the magic. This is the secret sauce.
This is talking off mic.
Speaking of secret sauces.
Yes. So we're actually selling a new barbecue sauce, PetaPixel brand. No, that's not it.
Chris.
Oh, the PetaPixel membership. So if you want to help us launch our new barbecue sauce that we're hoping to release, you should definitely look at supporting the channel by getting yourself a PetaPixel.com membership.
I can't control him.
The PetaPixel.com membership is $3 a month or $30 a year, and you get great benefits. First off, you can explore PetaPixel.com. All the great articles on there, ads free, except you will see ads for the barbecue sauce.
That's not true.
Okay, and then if you go to the merch store, store.petapixel.com, you get a 25% discount off of the merch there.
That's true.
And obviously the barbecue sauce will be in the merch store.
That's not true.
Why wouldn't we market it there?
Because we're not making a sauce.
You're crazy. Okay, and then on top of that, there's lots of other sponsors, partnerships that we like to use, and you'll get interesting discounts there as well. They don't sell barbecue sauce. And lastly, we also have, only for PetaPixel members, exclusive access to download JPEGs and RAW files from the production cameras that we review, and we will generally take pictures of barbecued meats with our sauce.
That one is not true either. Yeah, all of that was like 78% true.
That's pretty good. That's a passing grade.
Related to sauce. I was trying to do a fun segue, and he just really wrecked it. So anyway, we'd really appreciate it if you'd consider a PetaPixel membership. If you enjoy listening to Chris talk about ridiculous crap on a podcast, well, that's the best way to do it, I guess. And I don't know if I'm really selling it, Jordan. That might be a bad thing.
Perhaps if you do sponsor us through that membership, then I will stop talking about ridiculous things.
Don't promise what you can't keep, man.
Okay, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
I wouldn't. Jaron, I'm just curious. Do you have a heavy sigh filter that you can just apply to the audio of this?
Story of my life. I can't have both of you constly heavy sighing at me the rest of my days.
All right, you know
I'm
what?
misunderstood and underappreciated, I think.
I have no comment. Let's thank you for considering a PetaPixel membership. I'll use that as if you want to take a look at it. There's a link in the description below. Let's get on to the news. It's been over a year, and Fujifilm says they're finally getting closer to fulfilling those initial surge of X100VI orders.
Yep.
What, Jordan?
I just think it's awesome. Like, their initial announcement was like, we've moved our facility so we can pump out X100VIs like you can't believe. And now they're just like, dear God, we're never going to fulfill all these orders. So they're getting close.
They've made more X100VIs in like the first year than they made the previous models ever. So they've
and that was on the market for like 4 or 5 years, I think, the X100V. So that's a lot.
Their production is like way higher, and they still can't keep up. So like that's the thing when people are like, they should have expected the demand. They did, folks. They expected the demand, and they are now making like 4 to 5 times more, and it's still not enough.
I think one thing that has to be appreciated about Fujifilm is, this is a wildly successful series of cameras. I mean, it kind of started with the 4, and then the 5 really was the one that took off, where they could not keep them in stock, and there was this huge demand for them, and a big used market where the prices went crazy. And so Fujifilm legitimately feel bad. We talked to them about this. Like, they feel bad that there are then people who are opportunistically buying these cameras and reselling them for massive profits. And that's not something that they want to be occurring. And it's not that they're upset they're missing out money, because they're not. I mean, they sold the camera in the first place. What they're upset about is that a lot of their potential customers are getting taken advantage of. And I mean, again, if you feel like you want to buy some gray market camera for way more money than it needs to be, fine. But they don't want that. That's really why they're trying to step up production and avoid a lot of that. The scalping's a problem.
In that same article that is referenced in the story we're talking about, which you can see in the link in the description below, they told us that they really do encourage people not to reward that behavior.
Yes.
And buy from scalpers, because it hurts everyone in that case. But I mean, you can only suggest at that point. I think some people just don't want to wait, especially when they don't know exactly when it's going to happen. And it's very difficult for people to know. It's very difficult for Fujifilm. Fujifilm as a company can't tell you when you're going to get your model that you ordered, because of their whole like dealer situation. And the dealer doesn't necessarily know either, because they don't know when they're going to get the number of units that they've asked for or whatever. So it's very complicated.
But more production's a good step.
Yeah.
It is funny talking to Fujifilm. They did seem like legitimately apologetic and concerned about the shortage situation, which is very different from like when we have a conversation with Leica and they're almost like, people are waiting a very long time for our cameras. Like, this is something that they're really trying to rectify, is the impression that I got.
Yeah. All right. Next one. Insta360 and Leica have announced that they have extended.
Was that a great segue on my part?
Wow.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Well done.
They've extended their strategic partnership and promised to make more co-engineered products. Here's a quote. Insta360 and Leica share a vision of creating the most advanced imaging tools possible. With this renewed partnership, we are excited to continue our journey together, empowering creators to capture like nothing else out there. And that is from the vice president of Insta360. So far, Leica's work with Insta360 has been limited to the Action Pro and the 1R 1-inch edition cameras. They haven't done a ton, but I guess those two alone were enough for Leica to say fine. Now, on that said, Leica seems very happy to put their name on anything that someone will pay them for. Like that's part of their strategy for like globalization of their brand is like, put us in smartphones, put us in action cameras. Thumbs up on
that. We see this from Hasselblad as well.
To a lesser degree lately.
Yeah, sure. And Zeiss before and stuff. Yeah, for sure. But I mean, excellent optics. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think the really interesting thing there is if we even just look at the last year, we have now seen a Sigma camera, a Panasonic camera, and an Insta360 camera with Leica's color profiles, as well as smartphones are starting to see them as well. So I do think they're really pushing in that direction, which is interesting. I kind of like that standardization. But I will say, like, I really like their, like, punchy, in video, their 709 profiles. I'm not crazy about Leica's L-Log, and that might come down to their own LUTs. I'd like to see more alternatives. And the more people that use L-Log, the more options we're going to see for it. But I'm always kind of like, a little not stoked when I see L-Log as the log recording format.
I will say you did have like a happy look on your face, or maybe it was surprised when you saw that Sigma was using it in the BF.
It was surprise, yeah. I mean, Panasonic really made sense because they've had that partnership for a long time.
Right.
Insta360, I thought it was just the lens, but then to see another member of the L-mount Alliance saying like, look, we don't have a log profile. If you remember their older FP cameras, it was like, look, you're shooting either 709 or you're shooting raw video, baby. There is nothing in between. And then the in between they took is from one of their partners. So I think that is nice to see.
I mean, dropping a log is better than not being able to drop a log at all. So for sure.
Yeah.
Better than nothing.
So last year.
What?
Yeah, that's a heavy sigh. Last year, Austrian auction house Ostlicht held the first ever camera auction in China. It was a historic first ever camera auction in China.
Did you know it stands for Eastern Light?
I didn't. I do know that.
Okay, well,
Thank you.
do.
The auction appeared to be a smashing success, with the headline item, a one-of-a-kind Leica 3G built for the German army, selling for nearly $4 million. Well, unfortunately, it turns out that Austerlicht now says that the auction was manipulated, prompting the longtime Austrian company to sever its relationship with its Chinese auction partner. In a statement on its website, Austerlicht claims that Lingdong Limited manipulated the auction and bidding results. Not
Sneaky.
a good look. Not apparently this company, this like they were trying to deal with them. I was talking to Jeremy about this briefly today, and apparently that Chinese partner just vanished. They just up and left. So like this was a con.
That's too bad.
That stinks because it only reinforces some thoughts about what people think about what like how like Wild Westy that China can be on some certain things.
I'm curious, did they say was the 3G one of the things that was affected? Like, did it sell for way more than it should have because of this?
I believe so.
I'm very curious, yeah.
I believe that's what they're saying, yeah. Yeah, let me pull up the quote here.
I mean, people got their money, right? I mean, it's not like they flat out stole it. It's just that
only a very small number of lots were sold, while the published figures did not reflect the true sales. Right. The results shared by Lindong Auction Limited and other platforms are misleading and wrong. Notably, the Lindong website has recently gone into under maintenance mode. Given these serious irregularities, we immediately and officially terminate our collaboration with Lindong in Shanghai.
That's a good sign.
Yeah, not good.
Did you know that Lidong means barbecue sauce in Mandarin?
Stop it. I will get a spray bottle.
Or a can with like coins in it. Shake it.
Yeah, that's all.
I'm pretty hard to annoy.
And you're very good at
annoying.
Both ways.
So, yeah. So I'm pretty confident I can handle it.
All right. Well, any thoughts on that sad state of that? I do want to make it clear that Leica as a brand is unassociated with this happening. So Leica's only auctions are the ones that it holds in Vienna and in Wetzlar.
Yeah. Don't mistake this for Leica's famous auctions.
Yeah, Lights auctions. Yeah.
Well, another camera story. This one's very exciting because we're gonna have like double news to share on this one.
A follow up.
So if all of you who've watched the channel in the last year remember, all three of us went to Slack in San Jose, or I guess it was Palo Alto,
the Stanford
at Stanford,
campus,
and we saw the largest camera ever made. Well, the largest camera ever made has been successfully installed in the Rubin Observatory in Chile.
And just to give context, I mean, this is the 3200 megapixel camera. It's made for a very interesting task of basically imaging and documenting the universe, right? I mean, this thing's going to shoot all sights. It's going to scan like the entire night sky. And just to give context, I mean, not only is this thing gigantic, but it actually had to be flown in special like vibration shielded like
we saw
cans.
it in the video.
Yeah, custom engineered
it
like
looked like
metal
a giant gimbal
cans.
that you could set it into.
Crazy. And then it had to be flown over in parts and then driven up a road in Chile. It takes basically a whole day because they have to drive very slowly to protect the optics. And it was fascinating, like how many sensors are in it and all the optical performance of it, the tolerances, how tight they get everything for a perfect flat field. Definitely, if you haven't checked out that video, we highly recommend it. But they now have it in the Vera Rubin Observatory, and it's about ready to take its first
I think it's going
photos.
through its final testing right now to make sure that everything is aligned correctly. What's going to be neat, though, is that we got our final dates approved.
What?
The three of us are going to Chile to take a look at it.
What?
So we're going to do a follow-up video where we're going to see the biggest camera ever made in its final position. In action, yeah.
Part 2.
Yes.
So
keep your eyes peeled for that one. It'll be coming later this year, but we're pretty excited about it. We've been planning this since, third quarter last year.
It's pretty fascinating.
Go ahead.
I was just when we were making the video, it's like, can we please, can you even show us a mock-up of what the images theoretically could? And they're like, no. So now it's really exciting to actually have some kind of result. It really did feel like a half-finished video when we first did it. It's not like we're just plugging this on because it was popular. The second thing is, Chris, did you ever see the movie Sorcerer?
Sorcerer. I feel like there's a lot of movies
up a bumpy road slowly, full of nitroglycerin.
No.
Wow.
Oh, okay. I wanted to do a recreation of the telescope going up the mountain path because this just sounds like the exact same level of terror. I
think I saw like the Sword and the Sorcerer. That was a little bit different. That was like a really campy B movie with I believe it was a sword that had side blades that could shoot out. It was really silly.
Based on a French film, The Wages of Fear.
No. There was no swords in that shot out at people. Anyways, you guys should definitely watch The Sword and the Sorcerer.
My bad. I thought you'd be on board.
We're trying to bring culture into this, Jordan. anyways, what's so fascinating about this camera is that it is a camera. Like, so if you love space, you're going to love this story. If you don't even believe in space, but you love photography, then you will also love this, because it is.
You should believe
like
in space.
It's just, well, not everybody does. So, whether you're observing candles in the sky or actual stars, millions of light years away, this is the camera that's going to capture it. It's pretty awesome.
Candles in the sky. All right. That'd be a good name for an album.
I'm trying to be inclusive.
So that's neat. Link to that below. In that story, we also have Chris's video where he talks about this that Jordan shot and I was there for. So make sure to check that out. The second to last story we're going to talk about this week is that we talked to Canon. You were there too.
I was there.
We
talked on the podcast about how tall they are.
And last week. And Jordan was frantically searching for the V1 and he did in fact find it. But one of the other things that we learned from Canon at the time was that they are committing to continuing their in-house sensor development. They said, we really want to maintain our in-house development strategy because it's essential to continue the differentiation that we have, for example, in providing the high-quality R1 cross-type AF capabilities. So, if you were wondering, is Canon going to keep doing this? Are they going to do what everyone else does and buy from either Samsung or Sony? Most likely Sony. No, they're going to keep making their own.
Mm-hmm. You know what is really interesting there is the exception to that are the Type 1 sensors Canon uses, which is, I suspect, very similar in the V1. I'm very curious because they were using Sony sensors for like some of the PowerShot like G7X series cameras.
That. That's you should have been there, Jordan.
Crack it open.
Snap it.
I mean, that makes sense because those sensors are so ubiquitous, right? I mean, it keeps it cost effective if you're just buying a model that everybody else is using as well. But this is cool news because frankly, like, Canon for many years had an issue where they were falling behind sensor technology wise. And that has, I'm showing my inner chest. Ooh. And
all the more reason to listen this week.
Right. Exactly. And how dare you, sir? And so it's nice to see actually a company still wanting to make their own sensors, and they have come a long way and they really have improved in both autofocus performance and image quality. So good on you, Canon.
The other thing that we talked to them about related to sensors was that there's this perception that they can't do high resolution because they haven't made a consumer camera with more than 50 megapixels.
Yeah.
Ever.
And really technically 45 is what they're pushing in the mirrorless.
Yeah, in mirrorless phase. So here's what Go Tokura, the tallest of the tall folk that we spoke to, said. If we were simply to develop a high resolution camera, that would be possible. However, if we try to develop a 100 megapixel camera using current technology, I believe we would have to compromise on many other performance factors, such as high sensitivity performance, continuous shooting performance, rolling shutter distortion, image transfer speed, and video recording time. If we do not want to compromise, the price of the camera body will skyrocket. And considering heat dissipation measures and other factors, it may not fit into a size that allows for comfortable shooting. This is all very reasonable. The technology for high-resolution sensors does exist, and we have it, but the challenge lies in commercialization of a viable product. That is why we believe it is still premature. But I think one day, absolutely, we will be able to do it because I'm also expecting that myself. When he said that,
was interesting.
The whole room laughed because he was laughing too. He's like, I want it too, guys.
He's like, it'll happen. Don't worry.
Did you just slide an A1 across the table? Like, look at this tiny thing with a 50 megapixel stacked sensor.
Yeah.
That's only 5 more.
It is.
Yeah.
So,
but you know what though? I mean, and prepare for the segue.
I'm prepared.
It's true that it's more reasonable to worry about dynamic range, good low light performance, that kind of thing. Because frankly, not many people do need more than 45. 45 is plenty for most people's work. It's a fantastic amount. 60, a lot of people even say they get in the Leica Q and the A7R5 and stuff, and people are like, well, it's bigger files than I need for that kind of camera. I like it, but not everybody's going to need it. But there is still a demand for higher resolution sensors. And a great example is the 102 megapixel sensor that Fujifilm likes to use in the GFX line of cameras. And one really interesting application where you absolutely do want that, where you actually can appreciate that, is in archiving classic photography. And so Magnum is actually committed to digitizing its entire color photo archive with the GFX100 version 2, which indeed has one of these state-of-the-art 100 megapixel sensors.
Look at that. That was actually a fantastic segue.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the story. I have nothing to add to that. It's just neat. Just something I wanted to share. Jordan, thoughts?
I just want to wave this around because there are people who are scanning snobs. If you're like, oh yeah, I'm using a camera to digitize my images, they're like, oh no, you need a drum scan. No, absolutely. I mean, if it's good enough for them, then it should be good enough for all of us to use a high resolution stills camera to scan our nags. So this is validation because that's certainly, I think, the most convenient, cost-effective way to do it.
Right on. And with that is the news, and we are now going to go to an interview with Fujifilm's Justin Stailey, who is the only Westerner on a product development team in any of the camera companies that we are aware of. I don't think there's another Westerner on any other
that gets that kind of inside opinion to share with the designers in Japan.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be fair. Hang on. All the Japanese companies certainly take information from the different markets and absorb it, but Justin gets to have an inside track with the design team on what direction they want to go, which is very cool. And he's a cool dude. And so we're going to talk to him and get a lot of information because why are we here in Prague?
It's because of the GFX100RF.
Yes, the new rangefinder camera.
Fujikina and the X Summit, the whole thing. But it's centered around this new launch.
Yeah, so let's talk to him about this exciting new camera, and then we'll talk about our thoughts afterwards. Okay, and so we're very excited to have this time. We are joined by Justin Stailey from Fujifilm, and Justin has a very unique role at Fujifilm that we want to talk about. But let's also get into this very interesting product.
Yeah, let's. Thanks, guys, for coming and taking time out of your busy schedules to join us in Prague for the announcement of this camera.
Oh, it's amazing. We're happy to do it. I've always wanted to come to this city. It's beautiful. To me, it's very much like a walking city. Mm-hmm. You get to explore, lots of urban exploration, sort of like street photography. And I think that plays very well into this product that we're going to talk about. Before we do that, just tell us what your role is at Fujifilm.
Sure.
Who are you, Justin?
I would say
who are you and what do you do? Yeah, why are you here?
my role is a little complicated. Mm-hmm. I have, I would say, two different jobs. I have a role inside Fujifilm North American company, so in the US. I'm senior manager of business and product development, so I do a lot of work with B2B, industrial sort of customers there. And then also I interface with a lot of high-end photographers. So in that role, one of the big parts is bringing back to Japan a lot of the information on, hey, how does this camera work? This is features we'd like to have. And so translating that back into the product planning team, into the engineering team, so that as we develop product, we can make product that photographers enjoy.
Okay.
Right? Mm-hmm. My other role is I'm also a member, I think as Yuji puts it, the global product planning team.
Okay.
Right, so I actually have a role in the product planning team that, helping determine what we build next. So taking that feedback that I get from customers, talking to whether it's a photographer, whether it's even you guys and, people at a trade show or wherever I might find myself, taking that feedback back into that team and hopefully making our products better, more useful. And that ranges from everything. Jaron, I know we were talking earlier, the ISO dial, it started on the X Pro.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the pull-up ISO dial. Mm-hmm. Many years ago, I was sitting in a meeting and the team came over from Japan into New York, and we were sitting at a conference table, not unlike this one, discussing, how do we integrate an ISO dial onto a camera? And they were looking at little dials, a little roller wheel in the back that you could spin, that it turned the ISO. And I looked and I said, hey guys, have we considered this? And I actually pulled up a picture of an old film camera with that mechanism. And the engineers kind of looked at me like, okay. The product designers looked at me and went, that's cool.
Yeah.
Why didn't we think of that? But that became the nexus of the design of the X Pro and the X100 to have that ring. It's been refined since, right? The original one, you had to hold it up and spin, just like the film cameras were.
Right, yeah.
And now, because of digital and the way we change ISO more frequently, they've revised that into the click up,
stays
click
up,
down.
and you can it worked really, really well.
So, I just kind of wanted to point this out because you mentioned it to me. It is unusual for someone to be like not in Japan to be on these product planning teams, correct? It's like, I haven't seen it before.
Yeah, I mean, all photographic companies take feedback from the different regions, absolutely, but it usually is through like maybe a more levels of hierarchy to get through before that information gets there, right? So you have more of a direct route, I suppose.
More of a direct route, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say, fairly regular conversations with the team in Japan, lots of Zoom meetings, and probably at least 2, maybe 4, maybe more times a year, I end up in Japan for a week, usually, to talk about what ideas, brainstorm, what do we do next? Where do we go?
So then I guess that leads me to this GFX100RF. It's a unique product. It's something that we haven't really seen before very often, like a fixed lens, compact camera, medium format sensor, right? I mean, that's quite a rare thing. Not many companies attempt to do that. So from that standpoint of designing product, taking feedback, tell us why you made this camera. What kind of feedback did you get that led you to make a product like this?
I mean, we did have people requesting it, right? Looking at the X100 and the X100 concept, having that small, light, portable camera that basically I can carry with me anywhere. Right? This camera is the size of an X Pro, basically. And so to have that 102 megapixel GFX sensor in such a small, lightweight, easy to carry body, that was kind of the theme that we had for this camera. So when decisions were being made, is it going to make it too big? Is it, it's the same conversations we have with the X100, and you guys were in Japan for that. In questioning putting IBIS in the camera, they were questioning, is 3 millimeters thicker too much?
For the X106,
Yeah,
right?
for the X106.
Right. And the answer to that was no.
No.
Right?
But before that, any conversation that we had that increased the size of the camera was no.
Right. Like we cannot do this.
We cannot do this. We cannot increase the size of the camera. And the 3 millimeters to add that functionality was like, okay, we can do this.
Right.
And I would say that was worth it in that case.
In that case, I think it was completely worth it, because the camera is small already.
Yeah.
And the little bit of thickness, I think, increased the hand feel of the camera.
Right.
Where this camera, the best thing I saw was one of my colleagues actually took an X-mount lens and held it over top of the lens on the GFX100RF. And that lens is smaller than an X-mount lens.
Right. So then that's going to be one of the things people are going to talk about on this camera, right? So why no IBIS then? And the lens is small, but then why the f4? Because you obviously have a very big design challenge in fitting that large 102 megapixel sensor into a compact body that is the size of the X Pro. And I can attest, I mean, it is compact. That really does become apparent as you're walking around with it. It doesn't feel like a medium format camera. It doesn't feel like a GFX. It's substantially smaller than even like a 50R kind of style of camera. So why those compromises? What was the thought process behind that? And was that a crazy thing to do, Justin?
I mean, I think they explored all those options.
Yeah.
Right. I think, the 50R camera was loved. Right. It still, people ask us about that camera, and is there going to be a follow-up camera? And I don't know. But this camera can be so much smaller, so much lighter than that camera could be. I mean, we brought out the 50 millimeter GF lens for that camera to have that little pancake to make this.
Right.
That was sort of this camera version 1.
Gotcha. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And in reacting to sort of that love for that camera, I think it inspired us for this one. And also having feedback from photographers and seeing stuff online of, hey, we really like a medium format, a GFX X100. I think that really sort of motivated Japan to investigate the concept.
Right.
And then it was, okay, how do we make this like the X100, right? The X100, the original theme of that camera originally, we were talking, yesterday about this, is that small camera, big pictures. And so having that theme, that keeping the camera as small and compact, everyday carry comes up a lot when we sort of have these conversations. That thing that you always have with you, whether or not it's pocketable, that can be argued how big your jacket pocket is.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Right? Yeah, we mentioned like, is it actually pocketable? Not many of my pockets.
Depends on your pockets.
Yeah, it depends on if you're wearing skinny jeans or not. Or cargo pants, right? We can go down all those paths. But really, looking at what the camera is capable of. And there has to be compromises made.
Right.
We know that with anything in photography, right? With optics, with all of these pieces, there's compromise.
Yeah.
Right. If you're, we always say with lenses, there's three factors, right? There's size and weight, right? There's speed and there's price.
Yeah.
You can pick two.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. if you and they kind of drive each other, right?
Yeah.
If you want it to be a fast aperture lens, it's going to be expensive and it's going to be heavy.
Right.
Right. Like you tell me which two you want, and
you're gonna have to give up the third.
The third you're gonna give
this
up.
one you chose light, but it's still kind of expensive. Like that was something that I wanted to bring up. It's like the X100 series is obviously like a more approachable price, and you will sell and have sold a lot of those.
Yeah.
So this one is several times more expensive.
Right.
So like who is this for? Like, who's this photographer that Fujifilm was imagining? Like, okay, camera companies get requests to make products all the time, but in this case, Fujifilm listened to that request. Yeah. So who was that person that was asking for this?
I mean, I really think the people that have been asking for it, and I think the people that we think are going to be customers of it, are people that were looking for more image quality.
Okay.
Looking for more, right? And so I would say a lot of those people are probably not image makers as their primary profession.
Okay.
That it's
That's
more of a passion for them. And so it's finding time to make pictures. We've done some surveys of X100 customers, and we find that, that camera is a great gateway into our system.
Okay.
That a lot of the owners own other systems, and they hear, oh, Fujifilm has really beautiful color, right? The film simulations, they hear these things. And so the X100 is a really nice, approachable means to get into that system without you don't need to buy a camera and lenses and all of these things.
Right.
It's buy this thing, it's a camera.
Complete package.
Yeah. You go out, you make pictures with it. It's more about, hey, I enjoy street photography, and it's a little camera I can carry with me all the time. I don't have my big SLR camera or big mirrorless camera.
It's interesting you say that, because we know a lot of creatives who shoot, they might shoot Sony, they might shoot Canon, they might shoot Nikon, but a lot of them still have an X100 as that sort of over your shoulder kind of camera.
Yeah. And I think this camera, for some people, the APS-C sensor, I think, maybe is a downside on that camera.
Oh, that makes sense.
So you decided to smash that.
And so
conception.
This smashes that conception.
Okay.
Right? We have a 102 megapixel sensor here, right? Yeah. That you can do some crazy things with, right? Because of the pixel size of it, you can crop in and just keep cropping in, right?
I have to say, I do want to address that, because that is something that I've now found using the camera for a while now. I was skeptical in that regard, because digital cropping, I'm never a fan, of course, right? I mean, it's a trade-off. It's a big trade-off. But
you actually use the phrase, you're throwing away pixels.
You're throwing away pixels, sure. And at the same time, we do have 100 megapixels. That's a lot. And I think this is maybe one of the first cameras where it seems to make a bit more sense to me, in that you can give up some of those pixels to get a different kind of crop or a different aspect ratio. I mean, that seems to be kind of a clear design standpoint for you. And have that flexibility of not just being stuck with that 28 millimeter full frame equivalent lens.
Right. And on that, I'm not a huge fan of the 28.
Oh yeah, you're crazy, but okay. Well, not everybody's perfect.
What do you So what do you like?
I'm more of a 35.
Yeah, he's a man of culture.
Yeah, no.
I also like this.
Sorry, I just had to throw that in there, Chris.
What's actually very funny is that Chris, I found him saying, he's like, I don't know, 28's kind of wide. He said that yesterday.
I did for this particular city. There's times where I'm like, I want to go tighter.
So what would be better, Chris? Is maybe 7 more.
No. I still want the option to go to 28 for the occasional thing.
And I'm with you completely. But for me, what I enjoy about this camera so much is being able to use the digital crop lever, go into 35 millimeter equivalent, Right. And I hate to say equivalent because 4:3 aspect ratio, 3:2 aspect ratio.
Not quite the same.
It's similar, but a little bit different. And having the new view modes, right? Having that Frameline preview mode gives me that rangefinder experience that I really like, especially on the street. Being able to see, someone walking into my frame and have that experience. And I'm still 62, 63 megapixel.
Yeah,
plenty.
It's just plenty at that point, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's where a lot of other cameras start. I mean, I think the natural comparison that people are going to make, and I kind of want to ask you about this, the Leica Q, insanely popular camera. The latest version is kind of a similar concept and frankly a similar price. I mean, we're talking about a prestigious product. It looks nice, feels nice, 60 megapixels fixed lens, right? 28 millimeter equivalent. So, well, in that case, 28 millimeter full frame. So how much did that camera influence the sort of idea behind this camera? Like, I know not to say that you're, or did it all. I mean, I'm not saying you guys are following in somebody's footsteps, but I mean, that's a very popular camera and a lot of people are asking for that. And it tries to do the same thing of having a fairly high resolution sensor, wide angle lens, and then you can crop down a little bit tighter.
I mean, I can't speak to the design team in Japan on this. I wasn't involved in the design of this product in that way. What I can say is when we picked the focal length, we did studies on, what is the sort of ideal focal length for hand holding. And, sort of that chart of as the shutter speed comes down, where's sort of the sweet spot?
Right.
And that 35 millimeter, 28 millimeter equivalent ends up being the sweet spot. Of where you can get the best hand holding out of it with the slowest speed without blur, and so finding that sweet spot. And I would say it's something that as a company that we really do. We focus on exploring our options and looking at and trying to find, there's almost always a reason for something that we did. It's not sort of a random decision to go this way. They did a study and said, okay, this is the way that it goes.
Okay.
And here's the sweet spot in this, so let's stay in there somewhere. It's fun and challenging, I would say, sometimes to have these things because, and it also works for multiple people, right? You like a little bit wider, I like a little bit longer. Having that flexibility, I love the capability of reframing. I also love all the new aspect ratios. I mean, I don't know. It was something that, at first I was like, how often am I going to use this? And I find myself having that capability and having it translate into, software that I can, open a file up, and as long as I have the profile set to read the camera's presets, I can have that 617 crop.
Sure, and still have a raw file that's attached if you want.
It's the whole file.
On that note, actually, so that you've got two new physical dial triggery things on this camera that I wasn't expecting, and I based on what you're saying, it's really leaning into the resolution of this sensor. One of them is the reframing with a little dial, so you can do multiple different aspect ratios. The other one is the zoom rocker, and I'm air quoting for anyone listening. It's not. I don't like that because it's not really zoom.
But your different focal lengths are cropped.
Digital teleconverter is kind of the term.
Digital teleconverter.
Right. Okay.
So on that note, so these were very clearly things that were brought up because of the fact that it has resolution. So is that tells me like early on in the creation of this camera, they're like, we have the resolution, let's lean into it. Do you think that that's an accurate way to look at how they thought about the design?
I think it's a very accurate way to look at how they thought of the design of it, because that sensor gives us a lot of freedom, right? The size of the pixel being so large, right? And I mean, I remember when the first 100 megapixel version came out, I was with a very famous photographer, and we were playing with it, and we were in his studio, and inadvertently, inside in his house, we set the ISO to 3200. And we're playing, and he was just getting a little bit familiar with the camera. We went out and just did a quick little trip to the shore in Connecticut, and he went and took some pictures, and we came back to the studio and brought the files in and started opening some files. And he looked and saw the ISO that was in the file metadata.
And he was probably like, "Oh crap! Oh, we should have lowered it." Yeah.
Yes, that was the first reaction.
Yeah.
Was, oh shoot, I didn't mean to do that.
Right.
And then it was, oh my gosh,
Yeah, no
I
big
can't
deal.
believe how clean these files are
Sure.
at that ISO. Being someone that used medium format backs and everything for years, not having that flexibility. And so this sensor giving us that ability to, I go to 3200 without even thinking about it,
Right.
and push beyond that when I need to.
Yeah, I mean, we're spoiled nowadays for sensor quality. And we've talked many times on the show about this particular sensor, and it is fantastic. Whoever uses it, tons of dynamic range, very sharp, like high resolution. You can push the ISO high and it's fine. And I've been noticing that too in the files. And it gets dark in the city at night.
Yeah,
so, we've been pushing 5,000, 10,000, 12,800. And yeah, it's very good quality for that. So yeah, it's an interesting idea to make a camera where you're saying, okay, look, we have this resolution, we have this sensor, we can hand hold it properly at slow shutter speeds, which I am finding because of the lens range, and yet we have the room to crop and do aspect ratios. So it's kind of a way of, I don't know if I wouldn't call it like a sacrificial sensor, but you're certainly, you're not always shooting this camera with the expectation you're going to get 100 megapixels. And that's maybe besides the point. You're shooting the camera with the idea that I can take a picture, know that it's going to be sharp handheld, and then do whatever I want to it afterwards.
Yeah.
Or at the time, right?
Yeah,
Whichever
exactly.
you want to do.
If you want to pre-visualize, if you want to have that experience, you have it, right?
Yeah.
And that to me is the fun thing about the aspect ratio dial, right? Especially having the vertical 4:3 crop.
I don't know if I like that.
Well,
but yeah, so yeah.
It was inspired by the old 645 rangefinder cameras that we made that were vertical 645 format, just giving you that possibility.
Yeah.
And if you want to think that way, you have the ability to.
Yeah.
Okay, the lens factor now is completely different.
Yeah.
But right,
You're right. If you take a horizontal orientation, you want to make it vertical later, you're not screwed. You can do it, and it's still going to be an interesting shot.
Yeah.
So then let me ask you that. I mean, this might seem obvious, but what kind of photography do you think people are going to use this camera for? Like, what is your application in your mind?
In my mind, I would say, a lot of the reasons why we came to Prague, right? It is great sort of because it's small, lightweight. You're always going to sort of have it with you because it is small, right? You throw it over your shoulder and you don't really even notice it's there. It's the rugged construction of it. That milled aluminum top plate that we're using on this camera is just, it's rugged. You can just feel it when you pick the camera up. So I think that there's going to be a lot of street type, documentary type. I don't like to pigeonhole those types of photographies. But I think that's definitely some people that will do it. But I also think there will be, architects that want to have it as a visual sketch pad. I think there will be filmmakers who want to be able to have that visual sketch pad with them to document what they see. And so I think there's a lot of people that are going to love this camera because it is, an X100 on
steroids. I'll say it.
I didn't want to say it, but
Fair enough. Yeah.
It's the jumbo shrimp version of an X100.
Right.
That it does have that. So I think a lot of the crossover is there, but really for people that are demanding more, that I think that want to make big prints.
Yeah. Okay.
That want the ability to crop. Want the ability to,
We should say like an X100, especially the 26 megapixel versions of stuff, the class, like you can't crop that much without giving up a lot, I find. You basically got to love that lens. This is the first sort of X1, and I've been very vocal, and I'm sure you've heard me. I'm not a huge fan of the X100 personally. I like the idea, but I don't love, I like the versatility personally as a photographer of having different lenses and not being always stuck with one lens. I can enjoy it as a fun exercise. Like I can enjoy it as a fun exercise as a reviewer. I'm limited to this lens today. I get that. But as for me, if I was going to spend my own cash, I want something that has some versatility, especially if I'm spending even more in this case. So that I think was very interesting for me. That's the experience I've noticed here using the camera now is, it's not as limited as I assumed it would be.
Right.
There is flexibility.
So does that make it more attractive to you?
It does to me. Yeah. Oh, I would, compared to an X100. Yeah, this was sort of the first X100 that I was like, I don't hate it. In fact, I kind of maybe like some of it.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, but it's probably just the lens. It's probably just the lens. Yeah,
because it's 28.
But it is that interesting thing where I could shoot 3.2, no problem. 28 mil 3.2, no problem. Yeah. You're not giving up any resolution really to worry about. But I have been shooting it and cropping and playing with the aspect ratios, and I see it feels like, it always felt like more of a gimmick on other cameras, and it feels a little bit more useful on this sensor. Because this is the kind of sensor where you have the image quality capability to do that.
Yeah, I agree with you there completely. Going to 65-24, right? Double frame 35 kind of an aspect ratio like the TX1 X-Pan, right? And having that width of that sensor, that you're basically getting a 12K width image. Yeah. With the smaller height, or 617 being the same way. Yeah. Having some of that flexibility. And not having to go, now I want a 617 camera. That's a commitment to carry that camera.
For sure. Right? That's true.
Or a Noblux or Wide Lux or something like that, right? Yeah. Even those cameras are a commitment to carry with you, where you can go, the train station here, right? I have a spreading vista in front of me, and I can go to this format. I can visualize it, I can see it. Yeah. And knowing that, so I can play with the framing, I can play with, I'm level, right? We got the 3D level and stuff in there. Being able to play with that and go, this is a nice frame here, this would be a beautiful print on my wall. But then going click, taking the picture, and then going home and having that 4:3 and going, I should have looked up a little bit.
Right.
Or
change your composition completely, And of course, obviously we can do this on other GFX cameras, but you don't get that size and that over your shoulder compact capability.
So to kind of wrap this up, there's something I wanted to ask you about Fujifilm in general. So going away from just this particular camera. I think when we look at camera manufacturers overall, when they release a new camera, everyone except, I think, Fujifilm, you sort of are like, okay, that makes sense. I was expecting this. This is what the line needed. With Fujifilm, I think a lot of the time, at least I'm like, where did this come from? Why are we getting it this way? I wasn't expecting this. And that happens a lot with Fujifilm cameras. Why would you say that Fujifilm is making cameras that are either unexpected or completely different, or there's no this makes sense in the line sort of thinking? Because it is often very different than that. Where does that sort of come from Fujifilm?
Sorry, I had to do that. I think why we're different. I would say we pay attention to what other camera companies are doing, but when we look at products and we talk about products, we're always focused on what the market's talking to us about, what we're hearing from customers, and also what we think is creative and what kind of solutions we would want as photographers. Because if you look inside of our team, in Japan, in the US, in everywhere on the globe that I know, the people that work for the company are making pictures. And to me, are some very good image makers inside the company. Yuji's Instagram feed.
Yeah.
It's
nice.
he produces beautiful photographs. And so when the guy that is in charge of your division and your group, that is the head, understands photography and makes beautiful images, I think that then drives us to how do we make better tools for making images? We're not just out to make better mousetraps or, we need to do the new version of XT5. So, what's it going to have? It's, the marketplace really likes an SLR looking camera. XT5, XH2, right? And what features do they want and expect? in those cameras? And then what other things can we do? So going to a 40 megapixel sensor, having lots of resolution, and then also making H2S with that stacked sensor and being more about speed, having more video functionality, right? It's kind of finding these different places and really not trying to compete with another camera, but looking for tools that solve problems. I think is really at the heart of what we do is, okay, we see that there's a group of people that want to make, hybrid use. I don't like that term, but
well, we use it, yeah.
But they're young filmmakers, creatives, whatever we want to call them, that like to produce motion content. But then we also have photographers that shoot sports and action. Right. And an H2S is a perfect sort of tool for those two genres where they don't have to give up a lot. And then, if you're more of a different type of photographer that's looking for more resolution, you have the H2, which is identical. Like I have a friend that works for the Seattle Times who carries H2S and carries H2s with him all the time.
Yeah.
Depending upon what he's doing that day, what assignment he has, the cameras are the same. And so to bounce back and forth from one to the other, it's like, oh, do I need high frame rate and slightly better autofocus, or do I need more resolution? And being able to pick and choose and move from one to the other seamlessly, I think is a very great tool that the bodies are identical.
Right. But then this camera's kind of fun because it is a departure from that kind of concept where it's like, okay, but there's also this need for just a fun product that you can think in a different way, shoot in a different way.
Fujifilm does that a lot.
They
make cameras
do
that
that
are
a
just
lot.
like, this is a fun camera.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we enjoy photography, right? And so it's about the passion of photography. And I would say that one of the first things that I heard when I joined the company was that, these cameras take me back to when I learned photography.
All right.
Right? Because I joined right before the original XT1 was announced.
Right.
So I joined in December. I don't remember what year that was exactly right now.
Yeah, I know. It's getting back there.
I don't want to do the math.
We've
right
known
now.
you for a long time, Justin.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that camera and showing it to people. And even the original X Pro 1 at that point, right?
Yeah.
People just, they had a
gravitated to
nostalgia
it,
for that camera. And they picked up an XT1 and it was, oh, this reminds me of my first camera. And the experience of using it, looking at the top of the camera and being able to see the exposure triangle.
Yeah.
And say, oh, well, my f-stop is this, my shutter speed is this, not needing to turn the camera on, not needing to look in the viewfinder and go, okay, this is my settings right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no doubt Fujifilm has done such a great job of making that work, designing that properly, and capitalizing on it.
Yeah.
Interesting product.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for talking to us about what kind of makes Fujifilm tech. It's nice. Always good to hear that kind of information. And maybe the next time Fujifilm makes something weird and interesting, we'll be able to talk to you again.
I would like that very much. It's always fun. It's always great seeing you guys, and I'm glad you could take time out of your busy schedules to join us here.
Well, you too as well. Thank you.
Same to you.
We love being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Guys, what an immaculate interview. That was fascinating. I actually haven't heard the interview yet. I'll be looking for that once
Trust
the podcast
it
is
was
released.
immaculate.
Great job to both of you. Outstanding
Thank
work.
you.
Great lighting.
That's good. Justin is really fun to hang out with, really fun to talk to, and I hope that he provided you with some more insights into how Fujifilm does the stuff that they do.
Yeah. Now, as sad as it is that Jordan isn't here with us, we would have loved if he could come here. At the same time, it's not like he's sitting at home doing nothing because he has access to also a 100RF, and you have been playing with it as well, and you've been using it a lot for video. So let's talk now about our thoughts, just general thoughts about the camera, right? What we think about it.
Yeah.
And this sort of design feature, because it is a very big departure from what you would normally expect out of a camera like the GFX and a 100 megapixel sensor.
So we just dropped a massive video, like almost a half hour of thoughts on this.
Yes.
But the one thing that is not in that video that I must express at this point, because there was not a good point for me to put it in, is the adapter ring, Chris.
Oh, yeah.
So
we
disagree
a little
on this.
adapter ring on the front of it, which is the exact same texture as your manual focus ring. And every time you're going to twist it, I found myself unscrewing or over tightening that little adapter there. Now, Chris says, like, that doesn't bother me. That doesn't bother me at all. And that's because Chris is not manually focusing. But because I'm shooting video and the autofocus can sometimes be weird, I was manual focusing the whole time and I was constantly grabbing that damn ring, and I have to get this off my chest. It's driving me crazy.
So I disagree, and I assume that it's because of some sort of latent brain trauma that Jordan suffered as a child that he's having a problem with this, because I have manually focused this thing for close-up shots, bokeh shots specifically too, where I'm trying to specifically get focus. I mean, it has a really nice punch in. The EVF is very high resolution, 5.76 million dots, so you actually can focus quite easily. It's got cool things like peaking and all that kind of. Anyways.
If you grab the right ring.
Which I am not having a problem with. So first off, if you secure the ring with just, a reasonable amount of energy and force, it's tight. Like, it shouldn't be something where you'd have to like gently touch it and it's going to unscrew. I mean, you have to really give it some force. Whereas the manual focus ring is quite smooth. So first off, just from a tactile standpoint, Jordan, you should realize, this is the manual, this is not the manual focus ring. Okay. Secondly, although they're next to each other and they are of similar knurling, the actual filter adapter is thinner in diameter. So from a tactile sense, you should also be able to tell that the manual focus ring is broader and it's thicker in diameter, and therefore it should be what you contact first. And it feels very familiar to like any X100 user. Even me who disliked the X100 familiarly go to the actual manual focus ring. So I disagree with you, Jordan. I disagree with you.
Since we're talking about this thing, I think I do want to point out that I find the whole situation they've created for adding that hood and doing all of that to be exceptionally weird. There's too many parts, right?
But I think, here's the thing. This is the first thing that you really notice about this camera, especially using it now for a little while, is it is basically an X100. And the X100 had a kind of a similar setup, right?
Yeah, it's got a weird thing too.
You need a filter adapter, you need the hood, not only then with a filter to get the actual full weather sealing of the camera, but they basically kept the exact same system for the 100RF.
Yeah, but does that make it good?
But it's the same. It's functional. Okay, it works.
I just find it a little odd. There's too many little pieces. But I wasn't bothered like Jordan was, but I also wasn't manually focusing. So I'm not going to like go on a 4-minute tirade to belittle your opinion there, Jordan. I understand your opinion.
Yeah, there you go.
I think it was a fine opinion.
I am going to belittle your opinion and yours as well here, because like the legitimate reason why they have this as a separate interface is in order to have the filter ring on their 49mm filters, you have to have some clearance from the lens in this case, and it does make the lens somewhat larger. And I think what they're trying to do from a design strategy is if you're not going to use filters and you don't feel like you need to use the hood, which I honestly don't think you need to.
I don't think you do either.
The coatings are really good. Then you can make the lens itself actually substantially smaller. And people are going to appreciate that from like a pocketability standpoint.
Well, it's not fitting in any pocket.
Well, but yeah, I mean, a jacket pocket or a small pocket, or a small
only
camera
because
bag,
the Hochland pockets are enormous,
or a small camera bag.
Yeah. So, the things about this camera that I like are that it has a lot of the X100 lineage in there, which is really cool. What I don't like are some of the new things they've added to just this camera that are not reprogrammable.
Yes.
And one of them is like the zoom rocker, and I'm doing air quotes because it's not a zoom, it's a crop. I don't personally like to do that. I don't think you do either, Chris, but I know other people do. So I respect their opinion to like it. What I would like is the ability to reprogram that to film simulations, because that I would actually use.
Yeah.
And it's also that whole side of the camera is way too easy to hit and knock it out of position.
100%.
Either turn it on. Every time you pull that camera out of your bag, it was on.
Yeah.
And
maybe that's a design plus. I don't know.
The power button sticks out quite a bit. It will catch on anything you're pulling.
Yeah.
And then the zoom rocker, I found myself accidentally zoomed in so many times. I'm like, boy, this seems awfully tight for 28. And yeah, it was. It was because I wasn't at 28. I was like 3 clicks in.
Yeah.
So I wish there was. I think you can disable it entirely, right? But you can't reprogram it.
Yeah.
So you can't. What you can do, I found this, is you can go in. There's a lock setting.
You can lock
which gives you every control on the camera. And I just put it to that one stupid trigger. So that's the only thing locked. And then I left it in lock mode.
Yeah. So you can disable
fixed the issue for me. But yeah, I was trying to like shoot
That's
a
a
wide
terrible
angle
fix,
portrait, and
though.
the head was lopped off because I had it in its view where you're just seeing like the transparent layer on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, the lock you can get around it, but I really don't.
I would like
that
to
too
be able
much.
to reuse it. I don't want to just get rid of it.
Yeah. And I was thinking that, right? We talked about, well, it'd be nice if you could if you could customize it for Fujifilm simulation mode or something like that. But at the same time, then I just feel like, well, then that just means that I'm going to be into the next simulation mode every time that
that's
I don't
true.
want it
That's
to.
true.
And
But at least you immediately notice it.
I guess so, because like there is a view mode control on this camera so that if you do crop in, you can have it just zoom the whole composition in. So use the whole EVF or LCD panel as the new crop. And if that's what you've got it set to, you might not notice, because otherwise you're looking for a tiny icon on the right of the screen. And if you don't notice that, you might have just shot everything at like 35 mil field of
Does it
view
crop
equivalent.
the RAW too?
It does not crop the RAW. So
Okay, well,
if you're
that's good.
shooting RAW in JPEG, you're safe. But still, I could see that being kind of annoying and inconvenient for people. So yeah, but I'm gonna say something here. I normally, and Jordan can attest to this, I normally think that digital cropping is stupid, right? And I'm not a big fan. And I mean, the Leica Q has this as well. It's the same design aesthetic of, well, it's a 28 mil lens equivalent. So, and it's got a 60 megapixel sensor on the Q3. So why not then give people the option to use some of that resolution and trade it for field of view, get tighter field of view. And I'm normally like, that's a stupid idea because I'm throwing away megapixels. Plus I could just do it in post. With the 100RF, this is maybe the first camera of this type where I went into my mindset like I'm going to hate this, and I actually didn't hate it, because the unique thing about this camera is you have 100 megapixels in a camera that's quite small and quite pocketable, and you do actually have some more legitimacy to cropping and still getting a very usable result.
Yeah, I think you showed me like the most cropped in it can go, and you're like, "What?" I asked you what the megapixel level was. Like, oh, that's still 24. I'm like, "That's actually."
I don't know if it's exactly 24, but it's
somewhere in there.
It's still decent. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And whereas on the 60 megapixel sensors, even you start to get a megapixel, you're like, oh, that's pretty low, right? Like, so there's some method to that madness in this particular camera that I thought I was going to be totally against. I mean, the other thing that's interesting about this camera is the aspect ratio dial and having so many aspect ratio choices. And a lot of the creators we were working with, they loved it. They do a lot of video work as well. They're constantly rocking the video frames or expand style or wide angle kind of panoramic looking aspect ratios. And again, I don't personally use it that much, but I get it. Because you
see the appeal, yeah.
you can crop it.
I would probably never change it out of whatever I've set it to, but
I'm going to do it in post still.
Yeah.
But I see that there's a legitimate use case to do it now.
You could actually. I understand visualizing your shot.
Yeah.
The way that you really see it, and like that definitely would help. So I'm not as upset about that one as I am about the zoom rocker.
Yeah. I mean, I've always kind of been jaded towards any sort of crop on the image for the same reason as Chris has.
Sure.
But, I've for a long time said like, hey, man, RAW plus JPEG with a film simulation. And then if I like it, I don't have to touch it afterwards. There's no reason that you can't look at a digital crop or an aspect ratio change the same way. Like you've still got the RAW file if you made the bad choice in the moment. But, if it does save you a step or it's just fun for pre-visualizing, like these cameras, despite being like $5,000, are about fun primarily. I don't think people are going to be paying the bills with this thing.
No, I don't think you should. And that's actually a good point. The last thing I think we should talk about, which we didn't talk a ton about in the review, is the price.
It's already half an hour long.
Yeah, price is. I think the price is going to make this a much more. People will pause at the purchase of this than they did at the X100.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
it's very
almost
high.
$5,000 US is still very
expensive.
pricey. Yeah, the closest comparison you got to make is to the Leica Q, right? And again, most people who touch a Leica Q and use it usually end up falling in love with the experience. So, in that regard, you could say, well, this is a bargain in a way because we're getting a camera which is similar in size. I mean, the lens is actually smaller than Leica Q's lens. It's similar in size. It's effectively the same price. It does look very stylish. It does look, it's built well. It doesn't just look good. It's not cheaply built. It's beautifully machined. And you get nice controls. You get nice displays. You're not really like, it's not just a beautiful camera. It's actually got good stuff inside it. And so I could see a lot of people seeing this as a really interesting alternative to getting a Leica Q, not only because you can actually probably, well, who knows how easy it's going to be to get one. I don't know. I shouldn't say that yet. But Leica Qs can be difficult to get your hands on. This might be as well. Who knows? But it does give you that bigger sensor in comparison, and there's something there.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of people who are like, I want an X100VI. It's like, sorry, you're going to be waiting months. Fine. You know what? I'll pay the money. I'll get a Q3. I'm sorry, you're going to be waiting months for that. What else is there? Oh, there's this new GFX100RF. Well, I hope they can make enough of them because I think they'll be surprised by this as well.
Sorry, you can't get a 100RF, but you can get one on eBay right now for $10,000 today.
I get the sense that they're actually, the demand is there. It will be more than Fujifilm's expecting because I don't know if the dealers felt like they could move these either because it's expensive. It comes off as a really pricey camera that they may not think they're going to move that many of. Because how many cameras do you move in that price range typically? Not that many.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's, the other thoughts that kind of came to mind, I was pretty skeptical about this camera and I still don't know that I would use, I don't think I would use it. I still don't think it's made for me, but the controls are nice. I like the wider field of view. That was my main complaint with the X100 series of cameras. And then, a lot of people are going to say, well, the lens is slow. And it is. And frankly, I didn't like the bokeh very much. But it's also not like a super shallow depth of field kind of lens, And the image quality's there. The lack of IBIS is a thing, but the camera is incredibly stable to hold by hand. And my main concern was, well, that 100 megapixels of resolution is going to be wasted because I'm going to get micro blur and small amounts of motion blur. But even at slower shutter speeds, like 30th and stuff, it was fine. I didn't notice any problems getting good, sharp results. That leaf shutter moves the camera 0%. So I was actually quite impressed by that. So a lot of my skepticism in some ways has been, it's kind of been assuaged.
You'd softened on it.
I have softened on it, using it for a few days, yeah. Again, it's still a specialized tool, and it's not going to be for everybody, and it's expensive. But there is an enjoyable experience there that I was surprised by.
Any final thoughts, Jordan?
If I was going somewhere beautiful and wanted a landscape camera, I would look very long and hard at this. Like, I love the GFX100S2, but I can work with the 28 millimeter, and having something so small and light with tons of resolution that I'm going to be stopping down anyways makes a pile of sense to me. I think that's really compelling. And I mean, Chris said video. I would never use this as a primary video camera, but you know what? If you're out in a beautiful place and you can throw it on a tripod, you've got your microphone jacks, you can quickly record a little talk about where you're at, and it might be useful for that. Overall, quite well-rounded, but I don't think I'd lean on it as like a street camera. I really see it as a landscape camera. For that kind of work, I'd go to a Q3, personally.
Interesting. I actually didn't mind it for street photography. I thought it actually worked pretty well, but it does have some issues. I mean, definitely watch the video. I mean, autofocus, it still has some issues. IBIS, again, as Jordan says, might be more of a problem for video than for stills, but it is still a problem for that. And I don't know. I still think it's got an interesting, it's like an X100. I mean, the real key thing is, I thought they were crazy for trying to make the camera as small as possible, but it kind of makes sense in that it's really about the same size as a Q3 from a practical standpoint. It's only slightly larger than an X100. And so we are talking about the first camera like this that has a medium format sensor, but it feels like a pocket full frame. It honestly does in a lot of ways.
All right. Well, if you have any more thoughts or questions about the GFX100RF, make sure to put those in the description below, or watch Chris's review video. It's not really a full review. It's kind of hands-on, but there's
very close to being a full review. Yeah.
And put your questions in there too. We'll take a look at those next week. But for now, let's move on to what have you been up to? And Jordan, you sound a little sniffly, a little stuffy.
Yeah, I've been sick, so I haven't been doing a lot. That's me. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, wow.
Really? Wait. How did you get sick? Is this a kid thing?
Children.
Yeah.
They're the
Yeah,
worst. I've always said it.
Yeah. My son
Okay.
was sick, and then me shortly thereafter. So,
Yeah, not a probably then, a definitely. Got it. Good,
Yeah.
good.
Kids are wonderful, and they're also disgusting.
Chris and I are here in Prague. I think that's what we've been up to, and I have adjusted to the sleep schedule. You are not.
No, the jet lag is still real, of course. But you know what? I've always wanted to come to this city. It is beautiful. It's very interesting.
It's very beige.
Yeah, but I mean, well, I don't know. Like, it's cool because a lot of the buildings here, the old style, is basically brick construction, but covered in plaster. And we're seeing lots of interesting fresco work. And I mean, lots of pastel colors and stuff. I think it's quite beautiful. And obviously,
What was the town outside of Prague that we went to? I can't remember the name of it, but I liked that place.
Česká Krumlov we went to. And that's pretty crazy. Like, what an amazing castle.
It's like a medieval castle town. It was wild. Like, you could tell they built this up on the top of a mountain for defense. And then all around it, like the village popped up around it, and there's like stone bridges connecting everything. And it looks a lot like Wetzlar in some areas.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and of course, Germany's quite close. Austria's quite close. But I mean, coming from North America, always one of the appeals of going to a European nation is that you're going to have history. You're going to have buildings that are way older than our entire country.
Well, you were looking at like a stone in the cobblestone streets, and you're like, that stone has been there longer than Canada's been a nation.
I'm probably right, and then on top of that, I mean, it's just it's a neat mix of old and new, modern and historical. You see a lot of the sort of Soviet bloc, former Soviet bloc influence as well. So it's just an interesting part of the world, and I think I've been talking about it quite a bit. One of the video games that I love to play that I have no time to play is Kingdom Come Deliverance. Great game, and that is set just east of Prague, not even a 45-minute drive away. So just kind of cool to sort of be in that area. So it's beautiful people, beautiful culture, lots of history. It's a neat town to photograph. The light is interesting. So from a creative standpoint, it's a lot of fun. So we're excited to be here.
I have nothing to add to that.
We've been eating lots of meat in gravy, lots of goulash,
and they're dumplings. They say dumplings,
bread dumpling,
but it's just bread that's been like mushed together and then steamed into a dumpling.
Super dense.
So it's just, it keeps you full.
Lots of beer.
Yeah.
It is exactly what you expected to be food wise. Yeah.
Okay, let's get on to tech support. We're only going to do 2 questions this week because
these are doozies.
They're very large. So we're going to start with one from Fida. Fida? What do you think? How do you think you say that?
Fida. We'll go with Fida.
All right. Hello, PetaPixel team. I need your help getting to the bottom of this. I was looking through a manual of a 17-year-old Canon PowerShot and noticed a crazy feature. Creative light effect mode. This appears to be a removed feature because I found no example photos and only one mention of it on Ken Rockwell's website, stating that he, quote, couldn't find it in the menu. And if Ken can't find it,
no one
I don't know what to say. I looked through the manual of literally every other Canon PowerShot. Obviously, this is insane.
Would be time consuming.
Yeah, so they found it. It says electronic bokeh manipulation. Quote,
it's in the scene mode.
Called Creative Lighting by Canon. It's a trick mode to turn specular highlights into little shapes. And then the one we see here, it's hearts. I didn't try this because I couldn't find it in the menu system. That's what Ken Rockwell said. Obviously, this is insane, as shaped bokeh is achieved by placing a shaped cutout in front of the lens to simulate a shaped aperture. And I have no idea how they'd achieve this on a tiny point and shoot, let alone multiple different selectable shapes. As it seems like a removed feature, I don't think cracking open the lens housing on an SD850 would really do much to answer this question. I came to you guys because A, this is a really interesting feature. A point and shoot camera from 2008 having the ability to create shaped bokeh would be insane if it actually released. And I bet a lot of people would be interested in finding out the history of this feature and how it actually was planned to work. And B, I alone have no way of contacting Canon about this. I sent them an email, but the prospects aren't looking too good. They're a lot more likely to talk to a photo news site with a media team than one email that won't get lost to sea of other emails. And finally, C, your reporting and YouTube videos are always really chill. Also, Chris and Jordan are Canadian, so yay.
Yay.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Yeah. It is an interesting conundrum. And to be honest, we're not necessarily going to have the answer. So the first thing I would preface with this is what's great about having this podcast, one of the things we really love, we've seen this before, is when we get stumped or, questions come up and stuff like that, the whole community is also here to help answer the question. And so, are you shifting? What are you doing back there?
I'm moving around. My neck hurts.
All right. And so, that's so hopefully you guys will have some
come to bed position if you're curious,
yes.
Chris.
we're getting there. And so, that's a really cool factor about the podcast. So hopefully you guys will have some insight. Now, looking at the results, just let's break down the clues. So Canon is suggesting that you do this at nighttime. That makes sense because that's where specular highlights like Christmas tree lights or whatever would be isolated against a dark background, where it'll really help to accentuate this effect. And from what we've seen in there, manual, stars, hearts, these are possible options. It's not unfeasible to put a shaped aperture inside the lens. It doesn't have to be in front of the lens. You can have this shaped aperture well inside the lens or behind it. As long as it's in the light path, it could affect the aperture in this way. But logistically, having some sort of like little swing out heart or star shape inside the camera or on a rotating ring or something would, from an engineering standpoint, not be impossible, but I mean, it certainly would be a challenge to some degree. So I imagine that's what it was intended to be. I haven't touched an 850 in a long time.
Jordan?
I have no follow-up. When I first saw this, I was like, I don't recall this feature.
Yeah.
I know nothing. If I ask Canon, knowing my past experiences, I will not get a definitive answer. So again, I agree with Chris. Throw this out. If anyone's got an 850 kicking around, I'm very curious.
Help us out. I'm convinced it's a physical aperture. I mean, that's because frankly, 17 years ago to have a digital effect,
there's no way
that finds the specular heights. Yeah, that's pretty far-fetched. So I'm convinced it would be an actual physical aperture shaped filter that clicks, nearby the actual aperture itself in the leaf shutter and then change very easily. I mean, you can do this with paper, cardboard, and cut out shapes and stick it in front and you'll get a similar effect. So you can do this on any camera with a little bit of glue and paper and ingenuity. But if you guys have any insight, we would appreciate that.
All right. This next one is a god-danged novel. So what I'll do is I was planning on maybe skipping this and trying to summarize it, but I don't think I can.
No.
So, Richard, I'm going to read this entire email.
Oh boy.
And we're going to try and get through it. So here we go. Story time with me, I guess. Richard from Minnesota writes, Chris, Jordan, and Jaron, I have a focus problem. My relatively new Sony A7R5 paired with the Sigma 500mm prime was initially getting a miserable hit rate of less than 5%.
That's very low.
It was so bad that I returned the lens within the return window and switched to a Sigma 100 to 400 DGDN, which initially gave equally poor results. I viewed dozens of reviews and help videos and made numerous adjustments to focusing on the A7R5. Admittedly, the situation was challenging. Small birds, black-capped chickadees, house finches, etc., in a crab apple tree. A clear shot is rare because a branch or fruit is almost always in the foreground. With more normal subjects and the Sigma 24 to 50 f2.8 lens, I obtained some beautiful, sharp images. With similar results with both telephoto lenses, I have finally concluded that the problem is either me or the camera. However, I don't think I'm doing anything wrong with the camera setup. Often I get the box around the bird followed by a small box around the bird's eye. But the image is still crap, unacceptably out of focus. This has been really frustrating. So my first question is, what are ideal settings for bird photography with the A7R5? I guess I can pause there.
I guess we could pause there. Yeah, that's very interesting because I would say it's the exact inverse for me. Shooting Sonys, first off, I love that Sigma 500mm prime. I think it's one of the best lenses. I mean, we all, it's like near perfect.
That's probably why I
tested it on E-mount.
And we tested on E-mount with birds and with wolves and wolf dogs and stuff, and it did great. I mean, we had almost no problems. So I'd say that I would normally get a 95% hit rate, even with moving bilfs. So yeah, that's very strange. Certainly having branches, twigs, and stuff in between the animals can be very difficult for an autofocusing system. And the A7R5 having an AI-based subject detection mode for birds does help to mitigate that quite a bit because it can detect the shape of the animal, find the eye, and if you're getting the box and stuff like that, that means it's in focus. So I'm finding that very, very strange.
Well, on this note, that actually you mentioned the AI, that is the next section.
Yes, and we will talk about that. It could be a factor of what focusing point you're using. I mean, if I'm trying to shoot through trees and stuff like that, I would normally use like a very small pinpoint classically to get it through that structure onto the animal. But the subject detection should kind of take care of that for you. That's kind of the point. So the only other thing that I would think that you want to make sure of is that you have fast enough shutter speed. That's the only thing I can think of is if you're still shooting too slow a shutter speed, you might be in focus, but you're still getting a soft image. But if that's not the case, I don't know, honestly.
What is a shutter speed he should be aiming for?
I typically want at least 1,000th of a second when I shoot wildlife like that. I mean, that's like my minimum go-to.
Yeah.
You know, even if people say 500s for the focal length for hand holding, it doesn't do anything as far as like movement goes. And I want to be able to have something that will freeze the animal, not only when they're steady in a tree, but also if they then take off into flight. So, and you know, wingtips and things like that too. So I like 1,000th minimum, usually faster.
Before I move on to this next giant chunk, Jordan, you have anything to add to that?
No.
Okay. Next giant chunk we go. Now on to the second part of my journey. Slowly, the A7R5 has been improving. This brings me to my next question. What the heck is the much praised AI chip in the A7R5 doing? If it is truly an AI chip, the program must be capable of learning. In fact, it seems that the camera is getting better at hitting an accurate focus on birds, even in challenging situations. At the same time, it still misses wildly in what I believe are easy situations. So the next question is complicated. If the AI chip is really capable of learning, how do I optimally train it to focus more accurately and quickly? Is it my personal impression that overriding continuous AF and focusing manually leads to the best and most consistent results? If I override autofocus and focus manually, does the chip learn from that feedback? Further, did I make its learning slower because my initial technique was to take a lot of poor images and delete them? I think we can go ahead and say, no, it's not doing that. It's not learning.
No, it's not learning. I mean, you know, so AI is a term that likes to get thrown around, and you'll get people who argue that technically, so what we're talking about is really more machine learning or deep learning, where
it's programmed in.
Yeah, an algorithm's been trained off of a lot of data, a lot of situations, you know, to be programmed to understand many, many different varied situations. And you could argue there's an argument that that is a form of AI. Fine, but that who cares? That's beyond the scope of this. But it is not AI in the fact that it's like learning on the go and adapting to the situation and that kind of stuff. No, not really. You know, some manufacturers will claim things like, oh, the more you use certain functions, the more the camera will learn from that. Not really. There are some situations where the more you use a function, the more the algorithm will go to that function, that kind of learning situation that it's already been taught in the factory, and just kind of default to that first because that's what you're using all the time. But it's not really learning. The AI chip is really extra processing power to handle all of this information. So I know maybe cameras will learn one day and maybe even speak to us and maybe even tell us that they think the barbecue sauce is a great idea and that we're a great photographer and that they really enjoy when we hold them more than anything else.
So, Richard, the rest of your questions in here are all relating to like, how do you properly train this AI chip? Which you don't. So you end it with, guys, I really appreciate the work you do. I enjoy learning about photography and new equipment. The entertaining way you do this is a huge bonus. By the way, I am a subscriber to PetaPixel. Awesome. Thank you very much, Richard. So what I want you to do, Richard, is I want you to come back, email me again. The last one you used was the correct email, and I want your camera settings.
Yeah.
And if possible, send us a picture of a hit and a miss. I'd like to see what we're working with here, because I'd like to revisit this because I don't know why these aren't working for you.
We want to help you out. But I mean, I guess what I found most confusing about this is, for me, one of the big things with Sony that I enjoy is how simple it is and how you don't have to set up a lot. So I will typically have the appropriate subject detection turned on, and I'll use real-time tracking. I mean, almost always I'll just have a box, real-time tracking, usually in a center position, and I'll just endeavor to put that square close to the subject I want it to track, and then just start continuously tracking. And then it will focus on the eye and it will lock onto that. So I kind of get the best of both worlds, where I decide where the focus starts by placing the box close to it, and then it will track that throughout the frame very accurately. And I find that Sony's do a good job with this, whether it's a subject that it's trained for or just an inanimate object that it's tracking by general shape, contrast, and color. And I find it does a really good job. That's, for me, the beauty of Sony, is I don't have to tweak it a lot.
All right. Jordan, anything to add?
And I just want to throw out, like, when they first announced all of these machine learning based autofocus algorithms, I had a hope that this would be an ongoing process, but it does seem like, hey, if you want the latest AF algorithms on your body, you're buying a new camera. And that seems like a real opportunity for another camera company to jump on. Is just like, look, we are constantly updating the subject detection algorithms. Seems like an easy thing to get a little customer loyalty that way. And I'm surprised no one has done it. Panasonic have added some extra subjects, but they're only ones that have already existed in previous, like other models. So I'd love to see someone do that.
Yeah, the main upgrade that we've seen in the latest Sony bodies is an actual extra processing chip. Obviously, that's not something you can upgrade with firmware, but that does, force you to buy the latest model to get that improvement.
All right.
Yeah.
Those are the two that we were going to get to today because they're very long and my neck hurts from this position that I'm currently in. So we're going to end it with the feel-good story of the week. This past week, the total lunar eclipse happened.
Of my heart.
The total lunar eclipse happened and photographers got really awesome photos. And I'm going to link to a set of the ones that we featured. But then there was one that we published even more recently that was really cool. Photographer shoots a lunar eclipse and the aurora.
Dang.
Which is super neat.
I always say like golden teal is kind of overdone, but you know what? I take it back. This is an exception to the rule.
Like,
that rocks.
Green and orange. Green and orange.
That is so cool.
Yeah. Hey, remember when blood moons meant like witches would come out and like steal your babies and like monsters would come out of the woods?
The monsters come back in Zelda.
Yeah, right. But that's not the case now. Blood moon is like, yay, let's go take pictures of the orange moon. It's pretty awesome. So good job. It was a Dan Zara.
Yeah?
Yeah, who took that? Zafra? Yeah, beautiful photo. Definitely check it out. It's always nice to feel good about things that used to
just go
murder us with zombies
There's
like
a
monsters.
bunch on the main article there. So scroll through a lot of them. Some really cool, creative ideas there.
Yeah, just to feel good about taking cool pictures and think about what you could do the next time. That's what this is all about, is taking cool pictures.
And to close out the episode, guys, and again,
please
Jordan,
don't do this.
we miss you, and I'm happy that I'm happy that you're doing okay, but we do wish you were here. But like this blood moon, the color of it, maybe that's more like if you covered it in barbecue sauce, that's exactly the color that it would be.
I knew it. Jordan, when I said please don't do this, this is what I was expecting.
Because it's not blood red. It's like a barbecue sauce brown.
You just ate. Why are you even thinking about food?
I'm not. We're promoting our
just had dinner.
I'm promoting our merch.
We don't have that. Guys, thanks for joining us this week on the PetaPixel Podcast. We will catch you for a normal episode and perhaps a normal Chris.
25% off our merch store.
Yeah, that's true, but there's no sauce there. All right, Jordan, it was nice seeing you. We'll
Great
see you
to see
again
you
next
guys.
week. And thanks everyone for joining. Bye. I'm going to bed.